at these weddings. And there's certain dishes that are only served at weddings, and they're brought out with great ceremony. And they're also served in rank community order, in a rather long line. The men sit on one side and the women sit on the other, and they start bringing the soup, the particular soup that starts being brought down. So close to the bride and groom and their family are the elected community leaders, then other respected figures on down the line. So the first time I went to a wedding, I was rather curious about where I would be seated. I kind of figured I was an important dude. I was employing virtually the entire community in one way, shape, or form in my project. I was well known and kind of an interesting figure, and so I figured, I probably didn't think I was going to rank at the top. I was not a community leader, but I figured I'd be somewhere in the middle. Turns out, not so much. I was seated at the very end of the line with the unmarried young men. This, of course, made perfect sense. I was an unmarried young man. They sure liked me. Folks did respect me. They enjoyed working with me. They were happy to have me there. But when push came to shove, I was an unmarried young man within that community, and so that's where I sat. Of course, the really joyous part of all of this is that people get married really young down on the island of the sun. So unmarried young man meant generally 18 and under. So being seated with the unmarried young men meant that I was seated with a bunch of preteen and teenage boys. So just ponder that for a minute. Cultures are different, there is no doubt about that, but there are some commonalities, especially when it comes to teenage boys. So there was pushing and shoving down my end of the line. There was throwing of food. There were fart jokes. It was awesome. I'm a 27-year-old PhD candidate trading fart jokes and throwing boiled potatoes with the rest of the crew at the end of the line. Actually, it was a good experience for me. It was a good reminder that my estimation of myself isn't always the reality of things. It was good, in fact, to be served last, to be reminded that I'm not the center of every single community. But it also taught me a lot about rank and about ranking. And we humans like to rank each other. We do it very, very well. I think sometimes you put 3 people in a room and they'll come up with a way to rank themselves. Rachel, I was thinking, you're in high school, right? Is there ranking that goes on in high school? Right, yeah, I think we can all remember that. There's the cool kids and the not so cool kids, and then even amongst I was a not so cool kid, I don't know if that's a shock, but we even ranked ourselves. There were cooler not so cool kids, And I think it's just doing what we all do. It's just, much more intense, right? And the sad thing is it doesn't really end. We can just learn how to deal with it. So how do we rank today? We Americans like to think that in our society we eliminated class and rank, but I suspect that most of us, particularly most of us here, know better. We don't have dukes and princesses and formal things like that in our society. Or it's not a recognized formal structure of our society, but the kind of money you make, right? Where you live, what you can buy, what you do buy, can serve to rank you. Now, some of us here in this community, we're doing fine, but many of us are on the edge. And our brothers and sisters of San Esteban, for example, are even more on the edge, and times are tough. So I want to talk about rank, and I want to talk about rank in our society. And I want to talk about it because tomorrow is Labor Day. So this is a particularly good time to think about rank, which often shows up in the jobs we get, the jobs we have, and the jobs we can do. Wages for average workers have stagnated so much now that the average male makes less now than they did in 2000. We've actually gone down on average wages. According to Robert Mellman, an economist at J.P. Morgan Chase, okay, he's an economist at J.P. Morgan Chase, he was quoted in the Wall Street Journal, and he says, workers feel like they have absolutely no bargaining power. They've lost ranking. They've lost status. They've lost a voice. And when you don't have a voice, it feels like you don't have any worth. So today we hear Jesus at a dinner party. And he makes two sets of remarks, one to the guests and one to the host. And to understand these remarks, we actually have to understand what a fancy dinner party looked like in Jesus' day. And this is clearly a fancy dinner party. At this time, the male guests, would have sat reclining on these kind of couches or benches. So you ate sort of lying on your side, like our friend Leah over here. So she would have guessed the grapes and that. And actually, though, it was very formal. So it was a U shape around the table. And on one side sat the host and his family. At the top, what Jesus is talking about, moved to the top. At the very top of the U sat the most honored guests. And they were ranked from most honored to least honored of the honored guests. And then in the next bench sat everybody ranked on down to the least honored. So the host, actually, also in one of these things, would have been a patron. He would have been a wealthy person who, in this society, his wealth enabled him to ask favors. Think of the Godfather, basically, to ask favors of those he was feeding. The patron could control things through his wealth and status, and the guests would have essentially been supplicants of various rank, and they're hoping to move their way up on these couches, right? And to move ahead, you had to be honored by the patron. So you knew how you were ranked by where you sat, quite literally. And so his story to the guests at one level sounds like he's talking about strategy, right? How can I make sure I'm honored and not embarrassed? But I think it's actually more than just about strategy. I actually think he's undermining the very idea of ranking, of using ranking as a way of determining our worth. Imagine for a second if all the guests followed Jesus' advice. Okay, he was speaking to them all. And he tells them, right, don't come to the head of the table, don't sit down, stay at the bottom and be invited up. Imagine if everyone did that. Right? Everyone piles up at the bottom. At the bottom. And then at that point, they're all saying, we're of equal rank, and we're now forcing you to rank us. The patron would be forced to rank. The patron would be confronted by people who consider themselves equals, and he would have to show that he ranked. It would be very clear that ranking was not natural or God-given, which is sometimes what it can feel like, right? That it's God-given in some way. But ranking is something that we do. And I think Jesus drives us home in his next comment to the patron. And the message is even more blunt. Quit inviting others so they'll do things for you. This would have been crazy talk in the patron-client system of the time, right? And he's saying, this doesn't work. Share your food with those who need it most, not those who you're going to get something out of. Share it with the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, people who cannot do anything for you. Quit ranking and quit participating in a system that ranks. I believe that at least one message of this parable is a call to resist ranking, a call that is very important today as we continue to pick haves and have-nots in the cold calculus of global capitalism. We are part of systems that try to rank, that in some ways do rank, but they also try to tell us that's natural and perfect, and you know, your rank is all you got, and so put up with it and do your best. We are part of systems that not just say certain people are going to earn more and certain people are going to earn less based on what they work, but certain people, even if they work hard, are going to still worry about even eating. And they're going to be told that you're not worth anything. And I believe that we are called by Jesus to resist. Resist. Resist the urge to be ranked. Stand with everybody at the bottom of the table and say we are all equal. Being denied a job or a meaningful life does not make you unimportant. You are equal with everybody else. You deserve a place at the table. You have a place at God's table. A table where no one is ranked. And we are called to resist ranking. We are called to call out situations in which people are unfairly ranked. This can sometimes be explicit, as in the cases of prejudice or racism. But it can also be subtle, when we benefit from systems of ranking that we don't even see. So we have to learn in some ways to see that which is assumed and claimed to be natural. We have to look outside our situations sometimes. If we're doing all right, we have to look outside how we're doing and ask ourselves, how is this working for everybody else? And you know something? We resist right here at St. Stephen. And it's as simple as when we bring food for the food bank, or when we work with Rick, and we go down on Mondays or any other day to the food bank or to the Utah food bank, and we give food to others who didn't get a seat at the table for whatever reason. Right? When we do that, we resist. It's resistance. When we host high school students in a few weeks, who are going to come in and learn how going on to college or technical school can give them a better life, can give them a seat at the table, we're resisting. We're working to get them to the table. We are working to come to the table when it is all right and to help others to the same table. You know, ultimately, the really cool thing in Bolivia was that despite being about as much of an outsider in this village as you could be, right? I didn't even speak Spanish very well, much less Aymara. I was tall and strange looking and wore odd clothes and completely behaved incorrectly all the time. But I got invited to the banquet along with everyone else. The neat thing about the community that I was in was that everyone got invited to everything. Now, you might have to sit with the teenage boys, right? But you got the same food as everyone else. There was absolutely no difference there. There was a place for everyone, and everyone got fed a good meal. There is a place for everyone at God's table. God does not rank. We will be fed, or we can be God's hosts. If you need food of any kind, real food, spiritual food, come to the table. If you are fed, welcome others. Bring everyone to the table. Amen.